Thank you very much for being here today. It's my pleasure to share another of our Living History series with you. One of my jobs at the museum is to manage our ongoing oral history project. And since our museum opened 25 years ago, we have gathered these stories about President Kennedy and the day of the assassination, talking to people from around the world. We've recorded over 1,250 of these stories, and we're always looking for more. So if you'd like to be part of this tapestry of living history, you can contact us via our website, jfk.org. We can do a videotaped interview here at the museum if you're a local, and if you're from out of town, we can certainly arrange a telephone conversation, and your story can be part of the larger story of the 60s that we tell here at this museum. Every so often in doing these oral histories, I have the pleasure of coming across a unique storyteller, and we like to invite those folks back to the museum to be part of this Living History program. And you're in for a real treat today because this is a two-part program. We're going to be talking a little bit about the 1960s and about President Kennedy, and then our special guest today is going to perform a few songs for us. So it's a real special occasion. Christine Lavin is an award-winning singer and songwriter. She's also an author. She has done 20 solo albums in her career, and she's working on her 21st right now. And she's with us today because, just like you guys, she visited the museum as a tourist in October of 1994. And she was so moved by her experience here that she wrote and performed a song called The Sixth Floor, which appeared on a CD that she put out in 1995. And so she's going to be performing that song today and talking a little bit about what President Kennedy means to her. So please join me in welcoming Christine Lavin to share her story with us today. Christine, you are the youngest Living History guest we've ever had.
Really?
Because you were only 8 years old when President Kennedy was elected in 1960. Take us back and give us an 8-year-old's perspective on what this transition from Dwight Eisenhower to the youngest president ever elected, what did this mean to you?
Well, as an 8-year-old, I was in a unique position because I grew up at an all-boys military school that was very close to West Point. So there was the whole military aspect of our lives. We ate our meals in the mess hall with all of the cadets, and we lived on the campus. But I also went to a Catholic elementary school, and I'm Irish Catholic by descent. So when President Kennedy was elected, for people like me, it was just so exciting that we had this young man, and he was the first Catholic president, and he was also Irish descent. So I think I was just excited for not any political reasons, but for just very human reasons, having someone that we could identify with so much more closely than the president before, because he was, much older and a military guy.
Let's talk for a moment about the political and cultural context of the time. You have a unique story related to the civil rights movement I'd like you to share with us today.
The one where, growing up at a military school where students came from all over the world, we had black students, we had some members of the Somoza family from Nicaragua, we had South Americans, and of course white people. So it was more of a melting pot kind of atmosphere, and open-minded and liberal. But our town was never quite like that. There was always a rift between the people at the military school and the town people. And there was also the poor part of town and the better part of town. And there was a dance at Depew Park in Peekskill, and the band was called the Soul Sextet, and there were 3 white students, high school students, and 3 black students in the band, and so they drew both white audiences and black audiences. But when we danced to the band, the whites were over here and the blacks were over here, but then a black student asked me to dance, and I thought this was the greatest thing. And I started dancing with him, and he had a girl who liked him, who didn't like me, and so she started chasing after me with her friends, and they caught up with me, and I got beaten up for dancing with the black. And it was the day after I had my ears pierced for the first time, and they knocked an earring out of my ear, and it was pretty traumatic because I thought I was doing this, by accepting his invitation to dance, was doing something that was good for everybody, but personally it was not good for me. In fact, the military school went bankrupt in 1969 and we had to move away. But for that whole year following that experience. Those girls bullied me in school and were always threatening me, and that was the only good part about moving away from that town was that stopped once we moved away.
Now, you mentioned that the school went bankrupt. Your father worked at the military academy, and so your lives were directly touched by the Vietnam War.
Yes, at Peekskill Military Academy, it was founded in 1833. It was an excellent school. Though, an interesting sidelight, L. Frank Baum attended Peekskill Military Academy, the man who wrote The Wizard of Oz. And he hated the school so much that he faked a nervous breakdown for his parents to take him out of the school. Some people didn't do well in a military environment, but it was more like a military prep school. And the West Point was just across the river, about 10 miles up. And traditionally, it's very difficult to get into West Point, as we all know. It still is. But when they had a really great graduating class, the 2 top students would get appointed to West Point. And 2 of those students were as all-American sounding as their names, Mike Kilroy and Bart Creed. What names? Mike Kilroy, Bart Creed. They both went to West Point, and they both went to the Vietnam War, and they both were killed. And their names are on the wall down in Washington, D.C. And to this day, I find it almost impossible to go to see their names because of what wonderful students they were and wonderful athletes, too. But my 2 older brothers went to this school, and when the draft was happening, my brother Tom was drafted, and he went into the Army. He was an MP in Vietnam. But my brother Greg refused induction into the military. He claimed, I think technically he was right, but he said that the Vietnam War was illegal because we violated the Geneva Accords when we invaded Cambodia, and that it was an illegal war, and he refused to fight an illegal war, and he was sent to prison for 6 months. He went to Leavenworth, but he only served 5 months because he was obviously good behavior. He was in there for good reasons. But that has affected my brother's relationship their whole lives, and it was also very, very difficult for my father at the time because he was Major Lavin at the military school. And to have something like this, and it was in the newspapers a lot about that. But by the end of my father's life, he did reconcile it, and he actually became a very anti-war himself.
I want to go back for a moment to the Kennedys. We're looking at a wonderful picture of the Kennedys, as photogenic as they always were. You were an admirer of Jackie, and you were caught up in the glamour of the time period. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, it was very exciting to suddenly have this young family in the White House. I remember, John and Caroline. And I think I was kind of envious and jealous of Caroline having such an exciting life, and I was just a couple years older than her. But having a first lady who was so into the arts, because I've always been very interested in music and art and theater, and to have a first couple that really appreciated that in their lives, and they were so different from all the ones who preceded them. But I mean, I was just a little girl, and of course I admired her so much. And then of course I live in New York City now and became such a huge fan of hers for all of the things that she did living in New York. I mean, it's because of Jackie that Grand Central Station is there and renovated and beautiful. Because if she hadn't gotten involved, the wrecking ball was about to hit it, but she had such a lifelong passion for the arts.
November 22nd, 1963, you were 11 years old. Tell us about your memories.
I was at this Catholic school, Assumption School in Peekskill, and suddenly, it was early afternoon, over the loudspeaker, our principal, Sister Imelda, said, "Attention students, everyone pray." That was it. We were like, what? And so we all started to pray. And I'm not sure, it's such a long time ago. I think she may have made another announcement and said, "Please pray for the president." And then about 20 minutes after that, she announced, everyone go straight home, don't speak to anyone, go straight home. What she wanted was, she wanted our parents to tell us what happened, because I guess they figured that the parents would know the best way to break this kind of news, especially to Irish Catholic kids, in a elementary school. And but it was so frightening for all of us. We had no idea what had gone on, and so we all just rushed home and, eventually found out what happened, and then, the rest is history.
And tell us about the rest of that weekend. You watched Jack Ruby shoot Lee Harvey Oswald on television. You watched the funeral. As an 11-year-old, what kind of impact did this have on your life?
I remember that weekend as being so frightening, and I was afraid to go into my bedroom by myself. And my mother, she's mother of 9 children. She was doing her best to try to console all of us, and but she kept saying it would be all right, and we'll have a new president. But it was just, I'm sure for all of you old enough to remember, it was just the darkest, scariest time, especially for young people.
And the next year, 1964, at the age of 12, you learned to play the guitar. How did that get started?
Well, coming from such a big family, and for those of you who are parents, you want your kids to have something that is theirs, that they can excel at and feel good about. And I seemed to have this inclination toward music. So my parents rented a guitar for me for $5 a month, and we couldn't afford lessons. My father is a very small salary at a military school, but our housing and our meals were covered, so that's how such a big family could survive there. WNET in New York, because this is just 40 miles north of New York City, had this woman named Laura Weber who would teach guitar lessons. They'd show it twice a week. And my little brother, Eddie, he loved devil dogs. They cost 5 cents. And so I would pay him 5 cents to hold the antenna out the window because the TV jumped. You kids have no idea the way TVs used to jump. And he would do that for 30 minutes, and so I could play along with the teacher, and I got a book from the station that cost $1, and I watched religiously. I watched both lessons. I practiced really hard, and that is really what got me started. And unbelievably, 26 years later, I was performing at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco with a group called the Four Bitchin' Babes. And just before the show, the stage manager came with a business card and it said Laura Weber, folk guitar. On the back, it said, "Did I teach you how to play?" I was like, oh my goodness, my teacher's in the audience. And so just before intermission, I held up her card, and I said, "Laura Weber, where are you?" And this little lady popped up and waved, and I met her during intermission, and she said, "You make up for all my live students who never practiced." And then she said, "And you're the best guitarist on stage." And I was actually the least of the guitarists, but she was so proud that, because when you do these things, you put these television programs out there, radio, you never know who's going to hear them and what kind of effect it's going to have on people. And so we stayed in touch. We corresponded for a couple of years, but she died. But she taught up until 3 weeks before she died. And she was at San Francisco State University. She was so dedicated to teaching. But what I like to tell people now is for people who support public television, if you don't like my music, it's your own fault.
We're going to jump ahead in our story a few years to 1994. By this time, you're an established singer-songwriter. You've toured around the country, around the world, and you come to Dallas. And you come across the 6th floor museum. And how did you find out about the museum?
Well, usually when I travel, I'm a very bad sleeper. I don't sightsee, I don't do anything. I just stay in the hotel, I sleep, practice guitar. But I came to Dallas a day early, and I was well rested, and I was staying at the hotel
Plaza of the Americas.
Plaza of the Americas. I remember it had a skating rink. And, skating rink in Dallas, Texas. You don't forget things like that. I mean, ice skating rink. So when I was checking in, I asked the desk clerk, I said, is there anything nearby that I could go and see? Because I didn't have a car, because I live in New York. And he leaned across the desk, like very close, and lowered his voice. And he said, you might want to go see the 6th floor museum. And I said, whoa, I had no idea. I'd never heard about it. And he drew me a little map, and I walked over, and I got in line with people, and I was, when you travel by yourself, you can be a very good eavesdropper, much more so than if you're traveling with someone. And so I was eavesdropping on the people behind me and in front of me, and what they were talking about and what they were doing that day, because everyone remembers it so vividly, who was alive then. And I came in, and I remember just behind me there was a group of, I thought they were Australians. I heard them talking. I said, are you from Australia? No, we're from New Zealand. We're Kiwi. And have you all been downstairs to see it? You've seen it? I'm going to tour it again after this, because I haven't been here in 20 years. And I was afraid to do it before this because I get too emotional. But I basically just was paying attention, and I walked. By the time I got back to the hotel, I had half the song written. And I actually bought a pen. It was a little white, sort of like a Sharpie type pen, and it had the little logo of the 6th floor, and I used that pen to write down the words in the hotel. And the next day, 2 days later, I was on a plane, and when I took the pen out to write song, the pen went, pff, did one of those exploding ink things, and the flight attendants came over, wrapped up the pen, and threw it away. So the only thing I ever did with the pen that I bought at the 6th floor was write the song, The 6th Floor.
And 20 years later, we have given you a new pen. We did that yesterday.
They gave me 2. Yeah.
Now, this song, The 6th Floor, and it should be noted, you're known for funny songs. And this was a very serious song, and it was a sort of a last-minute addition to this album, Please Don't Make Me Too Happy, in 1995. Tell us about that, about adding it to the album at the last minute.
I was here on a Wednesday, and I don't remember the exact date, but it was October, and this record was basically done in New York. A producer named Steve Rosenthal, who's gone on to great things. He just remastered the entire Rolling Stones catalog. And but this is back 20 years ago, and he was working on a lot of folk records. And I said to him, I said, I just wrote this song. Do you think it might fit? And his first reaction was like, oh, no. They think the record's over. But I played it for him, and he said, oh, okay, yeah. And they called up the musicians who had worked on the record to come back into the studio. And he really took great care with this because he also remembered so vividly that day. And this is back in the days before digital, and we actually used tape. And so for the beginning of the song, we had recorded some interesting music, but then he actually cut it and flipped it and played it backwards because he wanted to create this feeling that you're being sucked back into time when the song comes on. And because he also wanted it to stand out from the other songs on the record because he felt it was very special. And so the record came out, and you never know who's going to hear these things. And it wasn't until last year, 1 year ago, 19 years after the record came out, I was contacted by Barbara Charles, who was she the...
One of the exhibit designers.
Yes, and she wanted to give copies of the song to her team, and I had no idea that anybody here even knew about it. And I was thrilled that they did because it's I know that there was a lot of controversy and a lot of debate before this place was even built, because she told me that when she had this idea, when they were working on it early on, friends and relatives and neighbors were appalled and wouldn't even talk to her because it's this nightmare thing that happened in Dallas. And I so understand that, because in New York, where I live, where we had 9/11 happen, there's still, people are still screaming and fighting over how to create a memorial that's tasteful and educational and serves the needs of the community and is very respectful of the families. So I was thrilled that they liked the song.
Well, we do like the song, and in fact, you're going to perform it today for us. You're going to do 3 songs, and without further ado, I'm going to leave the stage, put our music stand in my place, and then we will let Christine take over. And I'll be back at the end for a Q&A. If you have any questions, if you'll pass your question cards to the end of your rows, we will collect those and do a Q&A when she's finished.
I want you to know, I really do know the words to this song, but I didn't do it for many years. I relearned it last year, and I probably don't need the lyrics, but it feels good to have them here just in case, because I'm over 60, you know. There are lots of children here who do not understand. They squirm in their parents' arms. Reluctantly, they hold their hands. When they look out the windows, all they see are city streets. They don't like the videos. They're black and white and they have no beat. There are people speaking Chinese, speaking Spanish too. The most here look a lot like me. You probably think that they look like you. Well, you, a group of New Zealanders, just came through the door. It's Wednesday afternoon in Dallas, here on the 6th floor. Everyone remembers where they were that awful day. The man in line behind me says he was in high school rehearsing a play. The woman with him says she was on the center track. When she heard the news, and being here just brings you all back. We weave our way through memorabilia hung up on the walls. Campaign posters, photos of weddings and children running through those hallowed halls. A brief display on Cuba and the Vietnam War. You can't help but wonder what might have been as you stroll around the 6th floor. They show films here we've all seen on the news. I turn my head when that limousine comes into view. Instead I watch all these faces looking on in shock, reliving our collective nightmare, turning back the clock. I'm surprised to see the 6th floor has become a tourist spot where people from all walks of life feel compelled to stop. We look out the windows, feel our heartbeats race. The cars below just come and go, ignore this infamous place. The children up here make it clear they just want crawl around the carpet, and they tug on their barren sleeves. We're amused to see the souvenirs on sale by the door. I wrote this song with a pen engraved the sixth floor. Thank you very much. And it's true, it's exactly what happened. There were people speaking Chinese, people speaking Spanish, this group of boisterous New Zealanders, and all drawn to this spot, and all experienced it. And the thing the image of the children who were just not interested, and they looked out the windows and they saw nothing, and they didn't like the videos. I just wrote down what happened. And for songwriters will tell you that sometimes we feel like we're channeling a song, you know, it was just out there, and that's how I felt with that particular one. So, a few years later, I was on tour, actually in Western Maryland, when JFK Jr.'s plane disappeared. And remember, it was a Saturday. I'm sure you all remember that one too. They were searching and searching and searching, and I ended up writing a song about it. It had very different music, but the music didn't seem to fit quite exactly right. So one day, I don't know how it happened, I was playing the music from the sixth floor, and then using these words, and I realized that it's the same chord progression could work for this song. So what I did was I wrote this song, and I used something called the Boomerang Digital Phrase Sampler at my concerts. I'm doing a concert tonight at Uncle Calvin's in Dallas, and where I create vocal loops. And that's what I did with the song. I can't create the vocal loops here, but when the loops would be running, I would read or sing whatever the headline of the day was, and I put this together. Only one time did I ever do this, and it ended up on this record that I made called the Subway Series, that I start with the sixth floor, and then I go into this JFK Jr. song, and then I end with the sixth floor. And this is the song I wrote about the sun. There was nobody holding him back. Nobody could keep him down. Not your usual golden child. His hair and his eyes were brown. Everybody knew his name, his face. He lived in the glow of fame, flamed out in a state of grace. There were no witnesses except the ocean below, and a few distant fallen stars. A hell of a way to go. The ashes have been scattered, the evidence gone. Between the moon and the rising tide, our lives just go on. Now we stand at the dawn of a century. We look back across the years at the planes and the guns, the fathers, the sons who have disappeared. The cameras have stopped rolling, and the crowds are gone. Between the moon and the rising tide, our lives just go on. Our lives just go on. shooting each other. Two little boys drowned by their mother. Our lives just grew. The fascination with John Bonet. The Russian submarine was doomed, and still we parade. Our lives just go. Spend your money here.com. While China builds a nuclear bomb. India and Pakistan keeping score. While the struggle continues and east to more. Our lives just go on. Our lives just. I wrote this song with a pen engraved. The sixth floor. Our lives just go on. We are the lucky ones. We are the lucky ones. We are the lucky ones. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about any of what I've just done? Okay. So, Stephen has asked me to do this song, which I haven't done in quite a while, but I'm very happy to do it. I live on the island of Manhattan, and on 9/11, of course, we all know what happened that day. And I love to bake, and on September 10th, I had started 4 loaves of pâte de pain au chocolat, which is a bread that takes 10.5 hours from start to finish, but 7 of those hours you're sleeping. So it's kind of a great recipe for type A personalities who don't like to waste time. And so on the morning of September 11th, when I got up, I was about to do the next step with the breads, but found out what was happening down at the World Trade Center. And so, of course, I wasn't about to make those breads, and ended up probably like all of you, just transfixed by the television, but also being so close to where it all happened. My neighbor, we went to her place, and we all wanted to give blood. We tried for hours to call the Red Cross. Finally, we got through. They didn't need blood. And in the afternoon, I said to my friends, you know what, I'm going to go home. I've got to bake some pâte de pain au chocolat. And they were like, what? Why? I said, I started it last night. I don't want to lose it. And I had the television on as I was working, and that's when I found out that my local firehouse, 7 men were missing. Ladder 25 on West 77th Street. So when the breads were finished, I brought one over to my neighbors, and I brought one over to the firehouse. There's something, you know, when your firemen are in trouble, we just want to take care of them. And for the next 2.5 months, whenever I had 10.5 hours in a row, I would make 4 loaves of pâte de pain au chocolat for the local firehouse. And this went on until mid-December, and it probably would have gone on for years, except that I was walking toward the firehouse with a really great batch of breads. And 2 firemen were whispering when they saw me coming. I knew something was wrong, and I said, here's 4 more loaves of pâte de pain. And they go, lady, you got to find yourself a new hobby. I was like, what? Was there something wrong? And no, what happened is they had all had physicals the day before, and all the firemen had gained at least 20 pounds because we all wanted to help, and we were all making sweets for them, not stew, but what happened is, because I kept going to this firehouse, I watched it turn into a shrine. and ended up writing this song for the Firehouse. I've lived in this neighborhood for 27 years. I know where to get good bagels and exotic beers and the favorite sidewalk cafe where locals like to eat, but I never pay attention to the firehouse on this street. On one side there's a parking lot, the other side a laundromat. Across the street's a smart boutique where you might find an antique hat. And on the corner an all-night diner, a discount drugstore where life goes on, but not quite like the way it did before. At first there was this slender thread of optimistic hope. The digging went on round the clock. No one slept but somehow coped. The photos of the missing men were posted on the glass of the red door where we said a prayer whenever we walked past. The wind shifted to the north. Smoke filled our lungs, stung our eyes, burned our throats, left a bitter taste upon our tongues. We drank more than we should have before we went to bed. Everyone I know had nightmares, dreams all filled with dread. Day blurred into night, then day, then night, then day again. Missing was the buzzword, too hard to think this was the end for young men charging up the stairs as hell came rolling down, though logic was not on our side. We thought they'd all be found. 'Cause still there was this slender thread of optimistic hope. The digging went on round the clock. No one slept but somehow coped. The photos of the missing men were posted on the glass of the red door where we said a prayer whenever we walked. Neighbors lit votive candles, laid flowers at the door, baked casseroles and homemade breads, but wished they could do more. And the guys inside were grateful, but preferred to grieve alone, though trained to save the lives of others. They could not save their own. Maybe next year the pain won't be as sharp as it is today, though it will never completely go away. And we will talk in terms of before and after the attack, and wish that more than anything we could bring those brave men went on and on, some snapped. Most of us still cope. The photos of the missing are missing from the glass of the red door where we say a prayer. Whenever we walk past, whenever we walk past.
All right. Wonderful. And as I said before, you're known for your funny songs, and this is the first time you've ever performed 3 serious songs like this.
Yeah, ever.
I only have one question. Well, I have some more now. Okay. Well, I have one question I want to ask you here from the audience. Talk about the ability of the arts to help us cope and heal from tragedies like the Kennedy assassination.
I think, especially living in New York and seeing so many memorial services that were so moving, that when music is sung for things like that, it's not pop music, it's not hip hop, it's not what's top of the charts. It's songs like Amazing Grace, songs that are deep and that everyone knows. And I feel that the arts, more than ever, are so important right now, because we're living in a very confusing time. There's 24-hour news cycle. I'm a total news junkie myself. I watch CNN, MSNBC, I watch Fox, I read the New York Times, Daily News, and the New York Post, and the Washington Post, because I want to get the news from as many different angles, but it's overwhelming. Dave Van Ronk was my mentor, and one of the things he said, it's very, very hard to write a good political song, and it's very easy to write a bad one. And when you think about that, it's even more difficult, because news happens so fast. And I think that the arts, something about music, you can take it in a way that you don't take in just regular talking. And I feel that poetry and music can help explain things in a way that we need to hear.
One audience question that we had, this happens every program. Do you believe Oswald acted alone, or do you think there was a conspiracy? Thank you.
Well, yeah, that is one of those debates. I think, knowing how hard it is to keep a secret, I just think that if there were others involved, that it all would have been revealed. And I think that sometimes, it is what it is. And what isn't the Occam's razor? If the most logical explanation is probably the true one. So I remember watch that live too with all of you, and that was that was such a horrible thing too.
And our last question for you today, any different feelings and thoughts on this visit as opposed to that one you made 20 years ago?
Well, I haven't, it's changed in 20 years, right? The exhibit, or is it basically?
It's essentially the same, although there have been some additions.
Well, I'll find out tomorrow, because just like when I was performing in Washington, D.C., I could not go and look at the Vietnam Memorial Wall with the names of Bart Creed and Mike Kilroy till after I had performed, because, it still affects me. All these years later, I'm sure it does with all of you.
We do have one of Christine's CDs available. It's a live concert CD that includes both the Sixth Floor and the John F. Kennedy Jr. song, if you'd like to pick that up. After the program, she's going to be sitting over there, and she'll be happy to meet you and sign those CDs for you.
And if you give me your email address, I can send you the original recording of the Sixth Floor from the album that's out of print, and just for free, of course.
And where are you performing tonight?
It's called Uncle Calvin's. I'm not sure if I've been there before, because I'm over 60.
And what time is the concert?
I don't know.
Okay.
You'd think I would know, but I did. I looked at their website, and there's an opening act who's supposed to be really wonderful, and that makes me nervous now. Oh, no. I don't know.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking Christine Lavin for being our guest today.